For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Lynette Davidson. I'm the CEO of Legal Joy, and we help SaaS companies to stay compliant and scale mainly in the creative industry. And it's a pleasure to be with you all today. I think today's topic can be interesting for each and every one of us, even if you're not located in Europe, also in the States, because it affects the world globally. So today we are gathered here to discuss the Europeans AI Act and how this regulates the landscape in 2025. So first of all, big thank you for joining from all over the world and from each and every time zone you might be located in. And the Europeans AI Act basically is a piece of legislation that will impact a lot of how we work and interact with AI and how AI is governed. It's the first ever legal framework, and therefore it positions Europe to play a leading role globally. So during today's lecture, we're going to discuss how the European AI Act is shaped, what is meant with the intended purpose, which roles can we think of, like developers or users. We can think of what are the global implications of the European Union's regulations, what is regulated regarding general purpose AI models, what must companies do. And I think whether your background might be in technology, law, or arts, I think it will have an impact on each and every one of us, because I'm quite sure that many of us use, for example, ChatGPT models already. If you have any questions, then please ask them through the chat. We will answer them meanwhile. We will also ask some questions during today's lecture to make it more interactive. So I'm eager to dive in with you today. Let's get started. So first, I have a question for all of you, just to think a bit along with me. Like, what do you think of when I say the word artificial intelligence or the term? What pops in your minds? Maybe one of you can share an example of AI they've interacted with the past week without even realizing it. Perhaps you can just share some of your answers with me in the chat today. So we have one answer here. I've only been exposed to Google Gemini. Yeah, that's a great example. That's definitely an AI system that we're using. Technological knowledge replacing human intellectual capacity. Yeah, that could be true. That's a very interesting comment. However, the Europeans AI Act is not meant to replace humans. It's meant to work together. So we're going to discuss this topic in a bit. So I think the Gemini model from Google, for example, is a great example. Now, if we think about AI, then we can think about systems that help us to perform tasks that typically require our human intelligence, for example, learning, problem solving, decision making, or understanding language. But it will also help us to create algorithms, for example, and we can think of sophisticated tools, for example, a medical diagnose. And AI is actually already pretty deeply embedded in our world without us even noticing it. So if we think about AI, it basically means the artificial intelligence system behind it. And now Europe, what have they done? They created the European AI Act, which is basically a legislative proposal designed to regulate AI across the European Union. But it doesn't only affect the European Union, it's basically for any system that will have any impact for Europe as well. So it could be also based in the States. This is why it will have a global impact. And it basically is setting rules and regulations on how AI systems must be regulated, governed, and what obligations must be followed for the developer or also the user. Now, the core objective is to, for people and for businesses is to enjoy the benefits of AI. So we should be able to use it in a way that is good for us and will help us to move forward faster, for example. So it's basically a legal framework that should create a balance between tech, tech innovation, and our fundamental rights and public safety. Now, in one of our previous lectures, we have discussed the human rights, and we have many, but we can classify a couple of categories, for example, fair trial, human rights. So we can think of freedom of speech, but also that people should all have the same equal rights accessible. It's really important to have public safety as well, and we need regulations in order to create a legal framework. So the Act classifies, therefore, 4 different risk categories for AI systems. We will discuss this in a bit, but just to discuss them briefly, we have 4 categories named unacceptable, high risk, limited, and minimal, and they each have different rules and restrictions they must follow. So if you create any AI system, it must allow us, people, human beings, to feel safe and protected simultaneously, meaning at the same time. Now, Europe also wants to position itself as a world-class hub for AI development because we can see many AI tools now being developed, and it's going quite rapidly. And we need regulations in order to protect ourselves, for example, against cybersecurity attacks. Or, for example, think of a medical device that follows AI, an AI system. But if the medical device driven by AI will make a mistake, then the question is who will be held liable, right? These are really important questions to take into account. This is why the European Union has a couple of pillars that must be followed. They want to create a trustworthy environment. It must be focused on excellence. So AI that works for people and acts as a force for the good powers. And it must serve the social well-being of humans. Now, what is Europe's vision on this? They want to shape a digital future because we can see the whole world's getting more and more digitalized, as we have noticed and also discussed during our previous lectures. This is why they have approved the European Union AI Act in 2024 already. It will be implemented step by step, and it's the first ever legal framework on AI. And now, why is this important? Because it basically creates rules for the entire world that will be followed. Now, the European Commission and each member state in the European Union will join their forces on AI policy and investments. They will also align the priorities within the current European market, but also the global AI landscape. And now we can also see there is a huge demand for investment. We can see this in public and private funding. For example, amounts exceeding 1 billion euros per year in AI of public funding. And we can see there is a huge demand for high quality data. Now, why is this important? Because if we think of data being used, then the data you put in an AI system will also have specific data as the output, right? But I'm not sure if you have tried already. A lot of times the AI system can hallucinate. This is why it's really important to try to deliver high quality data. This is essential for building high performance systems, but it's also really important to create an unbiased AI system. Now, if we create biased AI systems, it will create a lot of problems, disputes, perhaps discrimination, and then the AI system could work against each and every one of us in the end. This is why it's really important to monitor how an AI system is worked and also how the AI system works and gathers its information. How is the output creating by putting in specific inputs? So now I wonder, students, maybe you can think along, like if we think of the root of the European AI Act, why must we regulate AI? Could you maybe name a couple of examples in the chat? So just to share your ideas, why do you think we need any framework? I see a couple of other comments. I communicate with ChatGPT for my thesis. Yes, you can definitely communicate with ChatGPT, but you should never rely 100% on ChatGPT answers. This is a AI system that can maybe help you to gather and look for information, but it cannot guarantee that the answer is correct. So we need an AI Act, for example, to prevent harm to humans. I see we have another answer to prevent misinformation. That's an excellent answer. Yes, we do, definitely. And we need this to try to limit the potential risks involved here. So why do we need something like the Europeans AI Act? Well, we basically need it because if you check on how it works, the European recognized that while AI can offer a lot of different solutions, we can also see that a lot of potential risks can be involved, for example, in healthcare or in transport or manufacturing. And these are risks to our own personal safety, but also to our fundamental rights like privacy and non-discrimination, and even to the functioning of our democracies. For example, if you're going to create a master thesis and you're going to write it with ChatGPT, and the system will give you specific type of output, then your whole research has been based on a biased system. This is why it's really important to make sure that the AI system you're using is not only fostering innovation, but it's also based on a trustworthy tool that respects the European Union values. I see we have one hand here. There's one comment. So Jay, I will ask you to unmute and share your thoughts with us today. Jay, can you hear me? Jay, I have asked you to unmute, but I still cannot hear you. Perhaps you can share your answer with us in the chat, because I don't think the unmute is working. If not, I will proceed.
Yeah, it doesn't look like the unmute is working.
Okay, let's proceed. Well, the European AI Act basically aims to achieve a balance between ensuring our safety and protecting our fundamental rights, and also by fostering innovation on the other hand. So it should build trust. This is why we need high quality data, and we are trying to set global standards here. So we basically are thinking of a ecosystem where AI can improve within clear ethical and legal guardrails. So think of it as building the rules for a new road, but it's basically a very powerful tool driven by AI, but it must also be transparent for the user. We need to know how it works, how the data is being processed, what type of data is being put in, and how it comes to specific outputs. So the European AI Act, for example, it's often compared with the GDPR. It doesn't apply only within the European Union, but also to global businesses offering AI services in the European Union. This is why it sets a global benchmark for trustworthy AI. And there are high penalties for being non-compliant. This is why many companies are now pushed worldwide to reassess their AI governance strategies. This is really important to take into account. So again, the European AI Act is not only applicable within the European Union, it also applies to businesses offering AI services in the European Union, which basically affects a lot of global companies worldwide. Now, I wonder if any one of you think it's maybe important for governments to regulate emerging technologies like AI? Or should innovation be left largely unrestricted? Now, what does this mean? Basically, it means should we leave innovation of tech up to, for example, private or global companies? Or do we need the involvement of the government per country we live in to be involved and regulate the emerging technology? What are your thoughts on this? I will give you guys a minute to share your answers with us in the chat today. Perhaps you can also think of potential pros and cons of each approach. For example, if we leave innovation to be largely unrestricted, then what could be a potential consequence? Or what could be a benefit? Could maybe innovation go faster? Or could it lead to specific problems? Yeah, we have a couple of answers, so thank you all for participating. Proactive, it's very much appreciated. We have one student here who says it's best if the governments do get involved. And then we have the government should regulate for national and global security purposes. That is a good answer, yeah, to protect the national, for example, the national rules or human rights and global security purposes, like for example, cyber attacks. Yes, it should be. The presentation will be shared with each of you after the class. The government does need to get involved. AI shouldn't be for private. Whatever has no regulation can be easily abused. Yeah, that's true. And we have another answer here. The government should regulate this to protect the integrity of the human rights. These are all very good answers. We have one person, I think, who says no controls at this time. Perhaps you could maybe motivate your answer and tell us your arguments why you think we don't need control at this time. I'm eager to hear more about this opinion. So we have one no, basically, and then a lot of students who do think it's important to have regulation on AI, which is quite interesting. So thank you all for sharing your answers. So I'm going to name a couple of examples and then maybe you can see why it's really important. So for example, if we use an AI system to perform a type of surgery on a human body, it is really important to regulate this. If this would be left unrestricted and unregulated, then it could have like very severe consequences. The same applies for cybersecurity. For example, if you put in personal data and the AI system is not regulated at all, it could have a huge risk, right? Because the data could be scattered all over the place. And also, for example, if I will use an AI tool that can scan your biometric identification, your face, for example, or classify a specific type of people, this could have a lot of negative consequences if it would not be regulated at all. This is why we need regulations, because AI systems, they can work in different ways. They can serve different types of purposes, but it's really important to have some type of regulations put into place because the options are unlimited, they're endless, but they will lead to disputes and perhaps even big risks for humans being involved as well. This is why it's really important, and one of the key foundations of the European AI Act, that AI must work for the good power and help us human beings to work together and build better tools. So I think we can go to the next sheets. Since we started a bit later today, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to finalize today's lecture, but we can continue in the next lecture otherwise if we don't have enough time. So now, what's Europe's vision? They basically want to create a Europe fit for the digital age, because we are not working only with paperwork anymore, like for example, 100 years ago. And it must be a human-centric approach. So it's not only about tech development here, but we should create AI systems that work for us and act as a force for good. So now if we look at the definition of AI from the AI Act, we can see a lot of words here, but it's basically most important to think of a type of technology that is designed to make predictions, content suggestions, or decisions that can impact both physical and virtual environments. Now, if we look at the exact definition given, we can see that something is being created from the input it receives, the AI system, and how it generates outputs. And this is why it's important, because the system creates something from the input it receives, it creates output, right? So it's really important to have a transparent AI model, because it's really easy to create a biased system, because it depends on the amount of inputs and how the system is working, what type of output will be created by the AI model in the end. So it's really important to think of an AI tool that will create, for example, a specific advantage that will help us to serve and improve our well-being. So think of the healthcare industry, environmental industry, or for example, technology. And also we should create trustworthy systems. This is why it's important, because the user, if you are an end user, you must feel secure when you're going to use an AI system, because you need to put in data, first of all, which is really important. And trust is seen as a prerequisite for widespread AI adoption, but also for innovation. This is why we need clear rules, but also accountability if things do go wrong or if harm is being caused. So if we look at AI a bit closer, we can see it's not really focusing, for example, on traditional software. Um, it actually covers most of the systems available on the market, AI systems. And the European Commission has created guidelines for applying the definition of an AI system. Now, what is Article 2 of the Treaty of the European Union? And why is this important to discuss during today's lecture? Because if we think of AI, we should also think of the respect we should have for human rights. And AI should work with us as human beings, not against us. So the European Union has found that AI systems must balance and respect the founding values, meaning human rights. So think of human dignity, freedom, the right of democracy, equality, and the rule of law, but also respect for human rights in total, including the rights of persons belonging to minorities. This is really important, because these rights must be respected within Europe, but also by companies that are, for example, providing AI systems within the European Union. And we have legislation per member state. So for example, Netherlands, Belgium, France, Germany. But it's also created by the European Union institutions. So these rights must be respected by the European Union when applying policies and programs, and meaning that an AI system that will fall within this scope must also respect our fundamental rights, which is really important. This is why we should be able, for example, to have a fair trial, marry whoever you want, freedom of speech, and an AI system must respect our founding values within Europe. This is utmost important. Now we hear more people being afraid of AI or AI systems that could perhaps work against us. This is why the European Union is really trying to create more importance on the founding values and AI working together as a human-centric approach. Here is also a video. I'm not going to show it to you right now, but if you would like more information, you can check the short video about the fundamental rights we have within the European Union. And as you can see, we have a lot of different rights, like approximately 50, but they are classified basically in 6 different categories: human rights, equality, democracy, freedom, the rule of law, and human dignity. Now we're going to discuss the European AI Act and what does it aim for. So we can think here of the European AI Act as the cornerstone, basically. It aims to provide clarity for developers, deployers, and users. These are 3 different terms under the AI Act. Now you can be a user if you are the end user. A deployer is also a user, but that's a different type of user, which we're going to discuss shortly. And the European AI Act should only intervene where the existing national and European Union legislation do not adequately cover AI-specific risks. So only if there is something not covered yet, then it should intervene. It also sets a precedent for a global golden standard in AI regulation. And the Act employs a clear risk-based approach, whereby we can basically think of 4 different categories: minimal, limited, high, and unacceptable. Now, who can we think of, like who will be the AI Act most important for? If we create an AI system, for example, like ChatGPT or Gemini, we can think of different key roles here. We can think of the developer, meaning the person or body or entity that created the system and puts it on the market. And we can think of a deployer. So for example, if we think of a developer, we can think of a software company, for example, that creates an AI system for speech recognition, or for example, to help overcome language barriers, to make you more understandable if there is any accent problem, for example. Or we can think of a system that will help banks to sort loan applications. Now, why is an AI developer really important? Because they can possess a lot of detailed information about the data being put in the system, and they can use and train the AI model based on this data, and for example, improve its operational features or specifics. Now, an AI developer in general doesn't have control over how another company subsequently uses or deploys the AI system after it's being developed. Okay, so the AI developer is usually the developer, and they usually don't have control on how another company will use the AI system. So for example, if we think of the bank, the developer will not interact with the loan applicants, right? So if I'm going to create an AI system for loan applications to sort them, the bank developer will not interact with the loan applicants or decide on the loan approvals. That's the AI system. So we have first the developer, AI system, then the end user, and then the company in between is the AI deployer. So who is the AI deployer? That is somebody or an entity, for example, or a body that uses the AI system under its own authority. And it will use this AI system, for example, to assist in making the loan determination or to sort specific loan applications. Now, their scope of control and knowledge is a bit different, because the AI, we can call the deployer also user, not the end user, but it's still the body using the AI system. The user, AI user, usually does not have control over the initial design decisions. Usually it's the in-between party, for example, that will have the system in control to use it and to assist by making decisions, but they have more control over assessing the fairness of specific applications of AI, for example, lending practice, or maybe they can think of how they can implement safeguards against potential risks, because they can better overview the operational end sides. So they usually don't have control over the initial design, like the developer who's actually creating the tool. This is in general the case, but it can be different. But they can usually think of safeguards to protect the tool against potential risks for humanity, for example. And if we think again of the bank example, like the bank that will look for an AI system to help sort loan applications, the bank is the deployer, also called user, and they can interact with the end customer to make the final decision on loan application. So here we can clearly see that the bank is the user, but they can still interact with the end user. And it's important to know the role of the user to understand the obligations imposed. So just to make it a bit more realistic, if we think of an AI developer, then the AI developer would be more able to describe the features of the AI system needed to train the AI system, for example, but they may not have insight on how the AI tool is used after another company has purchased and implemented the AI system, because that's basically beyond their scope. So now the developer is using the system to create the AI tool, but the deployer is better positioned to understand how the AI system is used by its end user. What's the intended use, whether and how to incorporate human oversight, what are the outputs from the AI system, right? Because they can check this easily. Maybe they received any complaints by the consumer, and they can think of other factors that might affect their system's performance. Now I have a question for you. Can you act as a developer and a user at the same time? Is this possible, or can you only be acting as a developer or a user at the same time? Is this possible for an organization to function as both? You can share the answer with me in the chat, please, so we can discuss. We have one answer here, yes. Yes, you can. Can you name an example? I'm curious to hear more. Can you name an example of a situation where you would be acting as both? Yes, to be from starting and ends. No, if you don't have the competencies of two roles. Maybe not because of conflict of interest. Interesting answer. Yes, it can be both. So we have a big team here saying yes, we can be both. A couple of no's. Now, let me explain why it is indeed possible to be both a developer and a deployer. It is possible for a single organization to function as a developer and deployer at the same time. Now, for example, you can think of a cybersecurity company that develops its own software to monitor traffic and customer transactions. And then, for example, will use its own software on its own platforms. So you can definitely act as both a developer and a deployer at the same time. If you are using the same type of software created on your own platform, for example, this will make you a developer and deployer at the same time. Thank you all for sharing your answers. That's really helpful and they're good. Now, why is it important to understand the distinction between developers and deployers? Why is this crucial to understand? Does any one of you have any idea why it's important for us to understand why a distinction is important? Why do we even make distinction here? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Accountability. Great answer. Absolutely great answer. For the purpose of usage, true. Maybe different finances involved. Also true. To be held responsible. Yes, great answer. To master the AI and comply with design and usage goal. Also excellent answer. It's really important. I will give you 1 more minute to name a couple of more examples. So we already discussed the responsibility and the design and the usage, and we have some more things that could be important here to think about. If we think of input and output, why is it important to have distinction between developer and deployer? Monopoly, exactly, as well. So these are all really good answers. Why is it important to have distinction? Because we have different legal and regulatory obligations, first of all, that are appropriate and relevant to the organization's actual capabilities. So, for example, if you are the developer, that means you might not have the same type of overview, or maybe you're not capable in influencing the AI system in the same way as the deployer could be. For example, the deployer is interacting more with the end user, so they can see, for example, if there have been any complaints, they can think of safeguards towards the end user perhaps better than the developer can. So because they have different roles, it's really important to have the accurate assignment of responsibility. So it's really important to have distinction between developer and deployer because they both have different types of responsibilities. Now, it's also important to think of targeted risk mitigation. And what can we think of risk mitigation? Well, it basically means that we need to ensure that the entity best equipped to identify and mitigate specific risks at different stages can be held accountable. So it wouldn't be fair if we are going to identify or give specific accountability to the other role if this person was not involved in this process. So we must make sure that we identify the party who is responsible for creating specific AI systems or AI tools, that we can actually hold this person accountable. So it's really important to have human oversight during this entire process. And the system's outputs are used in our real world, right? In the end. So it's also really important to understand any complaints received, do something with this, but also to track the performance of the AI tool. And we should also have alignment with best practices in other legal fields. For example, privacy or security legislation or healthcare. And this is why we need to differentiate roles and responsibilities. If we think of privacy laws, then we can think of the GDPR, for example. And we can also think of cybersecurity legislation, which often differentiates as well between companies or a third-party service provider. So it's important to have the roles clarified, who has which role, which responsibilities are linked to which role, and how can we mitigate specific risks. This is why it's really important to understand the difference being made here. So it's not only basically academic, it's also for, it has specific implications on how AI is developed, used, but also regulated by the European Union. And if you are setting up any AI tool, it's utmost important to understand the role you have, the responsibilities, what are the obligations involved, and what you need to comply with, also because of the fines, but also to understand what type of safeguards could be implemented. Now, if we look a bit closer on the European Union AI Act, we can see we have 4 different categories. Why? Because we basically follow a risk-based approach. And it's actually quite clever in its structure because it doesn't treat all AI systems the same. It has like a pyramid model. So the higher you are, the bigger the risk could be. So the stricter the rules will be as well. So on the top, we can see unacceptable risk, followed by high risk, limited risk, and minimal risk. So again, how higher you are, the more stricter the rules can be. And providers and developers, they have different obligations under the European AI Act based on the type of model they've created. And it's more on how AI is used rather than the technology itself. So you can think of how the AI system is being used, what type of risks are linked to it, then thinking of the technology being developed itself. So how you use the AI tool is basically determining the type of risk. This means the obligations will intensify with the user risk level, and they all have a different type of set of requirements. And companies are expected to undergo a process of assessing how the application of their AI system falls into the 4 categories. So, for example, if you will create something that is unacceptable because the risks are too high, it's prohibited, there will be very strict regulatory requirements. Like it's prohibited, it's banned in the European Union since February this year because it's unacceptable, such a risk. Most systems are most likely classified as high risk or limited risk. We also have minimal risk, but the European AI Act is mainly covering text for the high risk sector. And high risk AI systems, they are classified in Article 6 of the European AI Act, but they can include, for example, AI in product safety, certain biometrics, recruitment and employment. And they have a lot of obligations that are imposed. Now, at the top, we have the unacceptable risk. What does this mean? These are AI applications that will pose a clear threat to our safety. So think of something that is threatening our fundamental rights or maybe our livelihoods. These type of systems, they are banned in the European Union since February this year completely. Now, I'm wondering, could maybe any one of you think of an AI system that might be so dangerous or unethical that it should be banned straight away? I will give you all a minute to think of any example of an AI system that is so dangerous that we need to prohibit it completely. One used for biological warfare. Yes, that could definitely be a direct threat to humanity and fundamental rights. We have one person saying, I'm not aware of any.
Lynette Davidson, are you talking about the use of AI or an AI application itself?
Well, both. Like if you're going to use an AI tool for something that's illegal already, something arranged by national legislation. I'm more talking about the AI tool itself, creating an AI system. So the AI system, not specific the use. Of course, the use could be illegal as well, but most type of use is already regulated by national legislation or, for example, higher regulations on the European Union level or the states, for example. So we are talking about an AI application. We have a couple of more answers here. There are drones currently used for bombs. Yes, we have also for cameras, right? To, for example, detect specific type of actions. We have a couple of more answers. We only have a couple of more minutes. Dr. Lambert, I do need to leave 5 minutes after the lecture, so I think we're going to discuss this question and then we can proceed with the lecture of today during the next lecture.
Perfect.
Because
Yeah, we can do that.
okay. So let me explain a bit more because it's really important to understand the unacceptable risk of AI system. And we have, for example, AI tools that will create social scoring by governments, or we can think of AI that manipulates vulnerable individuals. For example, we can think of toys for children that encourages dangerous behavior in children, which is why it's utmost important to ban these specific AI systems. Or we can think of most of the real-time remote biometric identification, like facial recognition you can use, for example, for your phone, is in most scenarios prohibited unless there has been an exemption made. So we can think of, for example, law enforcement or some other type of narrow exceptions we have. But it's important to understand it's unacceptable to create AI tools that will create like manipulative behavior, manipulate human behavior, opinions, decisions, or classify people based on social behavior. For example, if I'm going to create an app that will record human movements and I'm going to classify these people, the type of people, in specific type of ethnical groups, this is not allowed. Or for example, if I will create other type of products that will help me to intimidate vulnerable minorities, or maybe I can think of a tool that will encourage you to use aggressive behavior. So it's not allowed to categorize people either, because this can lead to discrimination. It's important that to think of most facial recognition is actually prohibited unless it serves a very specific type of purpose. For example, law enforcement, but because of the high risks involved, these are usually banned and not allowed to enter the market at all. Why? Because we need to help people to protect their fundamental rights, and AI can be used, but only to serve the social well-being of human beings and only as a force that works for our goods. This is what we saw before. AI systems, they must have a human-centric approach, not work against us, and they should not encourage any type of danger behavior. I think because of the time for today, I'm going to give 5 more minutes to ask if you have any questions. And I would like to thank you all for joining today. And we will continue with today's lecture next time. And we will discuss the topic a bit more deep, and the presentation will be shared with you. So if you have any questions regarding the presentation, we will continue with it during the next lecture. If you have any questions regarding the first part of today's lecture, then please ask these through the chat so we can answer them. And you can also send me an email to my email address, which is also shared in the PDF, which I will also share with you here, which is hello@legaljoy.co. And I want to thank you all for joining and being very proactive and think of specific examples, because we will use AI much more than we actually are aware. And most likely many new AI tools will be entering the market in our lives, the lifetimes of our children. And this is why it's really important to think of how we can best use AI in a way that works with and for us.
We have one question from Ismail.
Ismail, can you unmute yourself so we can hear you?
Yeah. Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning, sir.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good morning, Davidson. Thank you. Nice to see you again. Happy New Year. Yeah, this is my question. The question is this: what are the potential unintended consequences of regulating artificial intelligence too strictly in the European Union?
That's a good question, Ismail. If we regulate it too strictly, well, this could have severe consequences, first of all, for the economy, because it will make innovation be more problematic. It will make it less attractive for investors to invest in AI tools. And for example, the States could be less regulated than Europe. So more people would, for example, launch specific AI tools in the States compared to Europe, which could create a very big gap in the markets. If we would too strictly regulate it, this will make it maybe too difficult or too expensive for companies to launch specific AI tools. And this could maybe have a negative effect on the healthcare economy, education, different types of fields we are in. This is why they want to foster innovation to work with us in a way that is more efficient. And it should be prohibited if it, for example, will lead to manipulating specific type of behavior or having biased outcomes. But we should not work against this, because it can really help us as well to figure out, for example, if there is a better medicine on the market to fight against a disease. So it could lead to a huge gap in the market and negative consequences for us as humans in the end, because an AI tool is usually much more capable of screening through tons of data in a much faster way than we as human beings actually can, if it's used in the correct way.